Okay, so welcome everyone. We're just waiting a couple of minutes just for everyone to arrive. But welcome to our session on Is Coaching the Magic Bullet to Advancing Your Organization's Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Efforts? It's really great to have you here today for this conversation. You'll see that your mics are muted and your video is off. So the way to communicate is via the chat, and we just do that so we can manage interruptions and that sort of thing. But we will be keeping an eye on the chat the entire time. And my colleague Snetta will be particularly doing that, and any questions that you have, she'll be forwarding to us. But I know that you like to engage with each other as well, so that's absolutely fabulous. I want to say a big thank you on behalf of my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens. Your donations go towards increasing resilience, inspiring and raising aspirations in teenagers. And we actually have an event on the 10th of March for International Women's Day. So your funds will directly go to making sure that event is free of charge for all the teens and the schools that attend. If you want to find out more about Rocking Your Teens, go to rockingyourteens.com, and my colleague Snetta will put that URL in the chat. So my name is Jenny Garrett, and for those who can't see me, I'm a Black woman with shoulder-length curly hair, wearing a black top today, looking pretty simple. And I have an interesting background. It's like a Japanese blossom, all blue, to make me feel that I'm outside, even though I'm in. I'm an award-winning career coach, author, and leadership trainer, and my books explore the empowerment of working women and women in leadership roles. Together with my team, we use our years of experience in coaching and leadership to support women and ethnically diverse leaders to progress in the workplace, as well as supporting majority group leaders in making inclusion happen. So today is all about coaching. And what is coaching? Some of you may have had an experience of coaching, others might not. I think people often get confused because there's a bit of a continuum from telling to being completely non-directive. And where does coaching fit? Well, coaching is about asking really good questions to help unlock your potential and unlock the answers in you. It's not about telling you what to do. And it's definitely not about having to have walked in your shoes, because those naive questions that a coach can ask when they don't know what you do for a living and they haven't walked in your shoes are often the ones that really unlock creativity, new ways of thinking and solutions. Although it's non-directive, it definitely is action orientated. And the idea is that through coaching, you come away with actions, you come away with solutions, and you make change happen for yourself in the way that you would like to for you. So, and when we're thinking about connecting coaching and equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think this is a really interesting space because there's a lot happening when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion. There is unconscious bias training you might have experienced. There's anti-racism training and so much more. But coaching seems to be an intervention that perhaps has been overlooked in terms of solution to really help people when it comes to advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion. So today, Sadia, Joseph, Suki, and myself, all listed in the Diverse Coaching Directory, a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from Black, Asian, and minority backgrounds, will discuss the difference that coaching can make to advance your equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. And again, my wonderful colleague Snetta is going to put the link for that directory in the chat. Everyone in the directory has been fully vetted. We've got references, we've got copies of coaching qualifications, we know they have their insurance, and they are the top coaches from ethnically diverse backgrounds in the UK. So I do recommend you look at the directory, and I do recommend that you pass it on to the HR professionals in your organization to make sure that everyone has the best choice of coaches available to them. So how will it work? Sadia, Joseph, and Suki will briefly introduce themselves. I'll start off by asking them some questions, and then we'll open it up to you for your questions and reflections. And as I said, Snetta will keep an eye on the chat throughout. The hashtag for the event is Coaching for Inclusion. Suki and Sadia are on LinkedIn, so you can find their names there. And Joseph and myself can be found on Twitter. So Ruvand is Joseph, I'm Jennifer Garrett, and our directory is @BAME-exec. But again, Snetta will put that in the chat for you. So I wanted to ask a quick question about who's here, really. And I just, you can put the answers in the chat. So if you're an internal coach in your organization, give us a 1. If you're an external coach, give us a 2. If you're an executive or manager in an organization, give us a 3. If you're an EDI professional, give us a 4. If you're an employee resource group lead, give us a 5. And if you're an HR professional, give us a 6. And if you've got a different job title altogether, then you can just let us know what that is. And shall I repeat it? You all seem to be doing fantastically well in noticing. We seem to have quite a lot of 6s, HR professionals, which is really interesting. And we've got a few 2s, external coaches as well, and a few who are executives and managers, and someone who's an internal coach as well as an HR professional. Thank you for sharing, Lydia, that you're a researcher and aspiring coach. And we also have lecturer with diverse students and part of the EDI group. None of the above, EDI enthusiast and a volunteering program development lead. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's always great to know who we're speaking with. Lots of people from HR, some people who are internal coaches, executives, and some people who are just very interested in this topic. Whoever you are, we're really, really pleased to have you here. So we'll start off by asking our panel to introduce themselves. Sadia, it would be great to hear from you first.
Good morning. So I'm Sadia Salam. I'm an executive coach, an inclusion facilitator, and a recovering lawyer. So I started life as a lawyer and did that for 20 great years, and now I use all that in everything that I do today. I'm sitting in East Dulwich in London. I'm brown with long black hair and a nice yellow bright jumper today, for those of you who can't see me. Sitting in a music room by night and my study by day. So that's the decks, my husband's music decks in the background if you're looking. I'm not that cool, I'm afraid. That's my husband, not me. And what do I do now? Well, now I work with amazing women, usually underrepresented women, helping them to look as good as to feel as good as they look on paper, and lead in a way in organizations that work for them and the organization, and also help organizations actually become more inclusive.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sadia. Over to you, Joseph.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Joseph Ogbonna. I'm a Black African man. I am a leadership coach working with leaders and aspiring leaders. I have had quite an experience in both education. I studied psychology many years ago, and then I studied for an MBA, so I know a little bit about business. I've set up small businesses as well as worked in organizations in building development as well as in business improvement. I treasure wisdom. I seek it, I love to hear it, and I utilize it in my conversations. It is said that I often have insights that are uncommon, and that comes out in my work with individuals or with people when I speak with people. So I'm really glad to be here and keen to have this conversation. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Joseph. And last but definitely not least, Suki.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Good morning, all. For those people who can't see me, I'm Suki Collins. I'm wearing pink with a multicolored scarf, and my background reflects my company logo, Pebbles Coaching. I'm an award-winning business coach and an accredited executive coach. I work mainly with clients from STEM because that is my background. I work with leaders on their leadership development and how to conduct themselves in boardroom. EDI underpins everything I do. I created a medical school where I made sure that we included both demographic diversity and cognitive diversity, where we recruited staff as well as on our day-to-day business. Coaching style of management underpinned everything that we did in the medical school. Today, the medical school is in the top 5 in the UK. In my experience, coaching and EDI creates an environment of innovation and curiosity where you have no choice except to thrive. Thank you, Jenny.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, what a wealth of experience that you bring. And it's going to be just a very exciting conversation. I think this is one that's well overdue. So I'm going to get right into the questions. A criticism of EDI training, and yeah, just so I'm going to say EDI throughout, but I mean equity, diversity and inclusion. So a criticism of EDI training and initiatives is that the impact is short-lived and doesn't deliver long-term behavioural change. We've all been on those programs, haven't we, when we're euphoric when we leave, and then 6 months later we look at this dusty file on the shelf and think, did I do anything I said I would? So, you know, what's the difference about a coaching approach, do you think? Do you think it can deliver this long-term behavioural change that we're after? I will start with Joseph this time.
So thank you, Jenny. A question I have is whether the leaders in the organization really want the change and are willing to invest both their time and effort to delivering all the benefits that equality, having an equal environment where individuals can show up fully as themselves and contribute fully. Do they really want that? Because if they do, then coaching is a way that they can get to actually what's holding us back here. Do I really want this? And having trained as a customer service coach, one of the things I've seen happen is you do deliver customer service training, people take it and go away and practice or may not practice. But when you deliver the training, and you go back in about 2 weeks later and have conversations with people and say, you know that telephone technique, how's it working? They will tell you then really what's getting in the way. Is the culture getting in the way? Do we not have the equipment? And then you can engage with them in solving it. And so with equity, diversity and inclusion, having the training is one thing, but how do you embed it when you're doing a one-to-one with a member of staff, or when you are having a conversation with a senior person? How does that come across in you actually showing the behavior? And because it is practice, these things are new to us, and it is practice by doing that we know. They say learning occurs when behavior changes, not necessarily when the knowledge goes in.
I love that. So this idea of coaching being the thing, you might have the unconscious bias training, but then you might have the coaching to really embed that learning and see how you're getting on, find out what the real challenges are. So such a really interesting point. I'll go to Suki next.
Thank you, Jenny. I mean, backing up with what Joseph said, you could have a framework how you want to deliver EDI. That's going to be very important, and that's going to be backed up by the leadership team as well as the organization. And also it's important for people to see what the value is going to be having EDI in the organization. What coaching does is, like Joseph said, you go for training and you come back, and like you said also, that we just file something away and we don't look at it again. What coaching does that I found in the medical school is that you go training and you come back and you give people enough time to reflect. Coaching is transformational. So when you actually meet with your coach, you then start to ask questions of the coach, as well as the coach asking you questions to direct your learning, which underpins, which doesn't just sit on the surface, it actually starts to change your behavior and also your attitude as well. So it's not like you just think, all right, I've got an unconscious bias. How am I going to address it? That comes in the coaching conversation because you have reflected after your unconscious bias training or any EDI training and you come back. So it actually, takes deeper. So it's not going to be just sitting on the surface, and you do start to behave in a way which I think is innovative, and you accept other people and you do start to make a difference. So coaching is there because coaching is conversational. It holds that mirror for you where you start to reflect with the other person asking the questions, and it does make a difference. So I think you do need a framework as well as coaching to make sure that you're going on that journey and you are making a difference.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I think in coaching, we often call it, we have a container, don't we? We have the creativity within it, but we have a container outside. So we know the frame of in which we're doing the work, and every organization needs to do that too. So yeah, thank you so much. And Sadia.
So I always go back to what's the purpose of the EDI training? And it's usually to create an inclusive culture. And how do we create inclusive cultures? By starting with ourselves, with the human being. That's where it starts. You can have all the tools and all the policies out there, but unless somebody turns up and wants to be inclusive and actively is inclusive, it's really hard for any program to succeed. So if that's your starting point, how do we help the human being? And coaching helps the human being. It starts with the human being. Coaching is all about having one-to-one sessions, 60 minutes, one-on-one with somebody where you focus entirely on that person. What's going on for them? What did they get out of that program? What scared them about the program? What's stopping them implement the actions that were suggested in that program? Because you can hear all these wonderful things, but if you don't take action, there won't be any change. Nothing's going to work. So it's really important to know why they're not doing it. So the training that we've done, how to talk about race, how to be a race ally. Trainings are brilliant on it. They tell you exactly what to do, and then it stops. Nobody actually does it. And in my experience with coaching, when you ask them, well, what did you think of the training? What have you done? And they say, I really loved it. I just couldn't have that conversation. I just couldn't ask somebody where they're from. Or I did ask somebody where they're from and they looked horrified. They didn't want to speak to me. I could tell that they didn't want to speak to me. And so I just left it. Without coaching, that just would have been left there. And they'd never have that conversation again. But with coaching, you're able to say, you'll be able to challenge it. Did you ask them? Did they look upset? And sorry if I offended you. You can help them come up with the language that they need to have those conversations again. Help them to try everything that the EDI program is asking them to try. Support them if it doesn't work out on the first time, and help them come up with a new way of doing it that works for them. Because an EDI training is for everyone, but we all need specific things for ourselves because we're all human beings and we're all different. And that's what I love about coaching. In 6 sessions or how many sessions you have, you can take them on a journey that builds on the EDI program and helps them feel connected with the program and with the outcome of having an inclusive culture within the organization that they own, that they feel attached to, they feel connected to, and they feel part of, and they feel supported in delivering those actions that are going to help everybody, and to talk about it, to talk about their journey, and to talk about their mistakes. It's really hard to do that on your own without the support of a coach. I couldn't do it. I spent 10 years of my career never talking about race, never talking about EDI, even though I was passionate about it. I needed a coach to help me find the courage inside me, tell me that it's okay to make mistakes, and hold my hand for a little bit of it.
Sorry.
So that's it, yeah.
Such good points. And I think one of the things here is about, particularly if it's senior leaders, just thinking about the HR people in the audience, there might be some senior leaders who you're thinking they're a bit stuck. They're not going to want to share their vulnerability and say, I don't know what to do here. They might even act like they do know what they're doing, even though they feel very uncomfortable. And what you're speaking to, I'm really hearing, Sadia, is this space for vulnerability that the coaching can provide that can be so helpful.
Jenny, there's also for the HR professionals as well, where if cost is a challenge, maybe if you're thinking it's very expensive, we can't roll that out to everyone. Yes, your leaders can have the one-to-one training, but there's also group coaching, there's also team coaching, which you can reach more people than with a resource than it would be if you were just allocating one-to-one.
Yeah, such a good point. Great to get people together in a group and have coaching sessions and share that learning and really embed the coaching approach in the organization. So I'm going to move on to our next. Oh, sorry, did someone else want to say something?
I wanted to say, just building on Joseph's great point, is when you give somebody one-to-one coaching, yes, it helps that person, but it helps the organization even more because they share. They get the confidence from one-to-one coaching to share all their learnings with everyone. So one-to-one coaching, yes, it starts with just that individual, but it has the benefits for the whole organization. And you get more champions for ED&I when you support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I just want to pick up on a point you made, Sadia. You said people having the courage to ask where someone is from. And we have a question from Morag, which is, I have found that this to be frowned upon. Do you want to elaborate on it?
Me? Yes.
Yes, yeah, because you said you had said that, and Morag saying she thought this was something to be frowned upon.
Yes, and I know exactly what you mean, because you can ask somebody, where are you from? And it sounds a bit kind of, what do you mean where I'm from? Why is that relevant? And that can be, but I think if you, and I know you always say, Jenny, is to set your intention first. You know, why are you asking somebody where they're from? And start off with yourself. You know, I often say I'm Welsh and I'm Bangladeshi origin, and I'll talk about it in that way. And it's if you're interested in somebody's ethnicity, because you're interested in everybody's ethnicity, then setting that intention of why you're asking, and you're not questioning them for being anything in particular, that will help the conversation. So yes, if you just meet somebody and say, where are you from? Yeah, I get it. Exactly, more like your first question, introduce myself. Yes, because I mean, that's a great way to do it. And I do it too. I always say I'm Welsh. And I originate from Bangladesh, and then it's much easier to have that conversation of asking people, because you're showing that you're genuinely interested in it, and we're genuinely interested in it because it's an interesting thing to understand where everybody is from.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing is to accept the answer. You know, when someone says, if you are someone where, whatever you introduce yourself and they say they're from wherever, even if it's not what you expect or what you'd like to be the answer, to accept their answer, because that's their identity and how they would like to express themselves. So I'm going to jump on to the second question. How can coaching benefit those from underrepresented groups who their organizations recognize as talent, but they're not breaking through that glass ceiling? And there'll be lots of talented people who go through the pipeline until a point when actually they don't, when they look up, there's no one who looks like them. So how can coaching benefit those people? I'm going to start with you, Suki, on this one.
Thank you, Jenny. It's a very good question, actually, because I found in Wales, it's not many BME community in higher education or in the private sector that I work in. And I think one of the things we make a mistake of, there are legal frameworks that tells us we've got to bear in mind about demographic diversity, that we don't actually go out and discriminate against people. So we go out and tick the boxes to say that we recruited the people, great, they're in the organization, fantastic. But one thing we forget is the language we speak is different from each other and how we actually come across. And I think important coaching, what it does also is, and also I find myself sometimes thinking, oh my God, am I going to fit in? I didn't as well. I didn't as much as, because I'm married to a Welshman. So this community that I moved in was Welsh people, and I didn't feel as much. But I noticed in people that we recruited from Asian backgrounds and Black backgrounds and even Chinese backgrounds, when they come in, they sometimes come out of meetings and they tell me, oh my God, I didn't quite understand what they meant. And what do you mean? And when I said, what do you mean? And this is the coaching area where we actually have this conversation, and they come and tell me, I felt like I was being discriminated against because I was trying to make a point and they didn't understand. And I think one of the things I think we need to be aware of is the culture that we have in the organization. I think it's important to have a common language as much as we can. And also, I think the coaching allows that framework, and also the space, I think what Sadia and Joseph and you yourself said, gives you that brave space, I think, where I think you can question each other without feeling discriminated, but also have a conversation where you're feeling that you can be authentic yourself and nobody is going to discriminate you. And for example, if you feel that, great, having a legal framework is great. Yep, you're not being discriminated against, but the languages you use, and that it's almost like you carry this uncertainty around you. Am I behaving as I should be? Because the culture of the organization is not very clear. And I think it's very clear to have the language is common, and the coaching, what it does is reinforces that message for the individuals, but it works on their potential rather than looking at where they're coming from. So I think that's very important, I think, to underpin it, because the coaching that reinforces that positive message. And if you're frightened, you've got that space with the coach then to talk about and talk to. I can tell you it actually worked in the medical school, because eventually we created the space where the cognitive diversity was very important rather than demographic diversity. It was all about not where you come from, what you can offer for this organization. That's what we came down to in the end. And that can happen with coaching because it's a long-term investment. It doesn't happen overnight. So it's very important to bear that in mind. Just because you're introducing coaching, people expect a return on coaching within 3 months, 6 months. It's not that easy. It takes a long time because the mindset, and it goes deeper. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. And if we could have resolved this, we would have done by now. You know, this is a
Yes.
this is a long-term problem which requires some sustainable solutions. Talking of language, you used the term BME just now, and when BME, no, that's fine. No, please don't be sorry, but just so we know, that means Black and minority ethnic colleagues. And it just shows as well, there is a lot of language in this space: equity, diversity, and inclusion, underrepresented groups, ethnically diverse groups, Black, minority, ethnic colleagues. So even in this space where we're just having a conversation today, there are many terms for what we're talking about, a very similar thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
And when we were having a conversation before, you talked about this emotional tax. So just now you were talking about the fact that they might come out of meetings and not be clear on the language, but there's something also about this emotional tax of assimilating all the time, isn't there?
Yes, it is, yes. Because you don't feel it. I think you've got to be quite open about it, I think, that you don't, but that you need to create that, I think, as I call it, the brave space, as I called it, which we created. What we did was we had a coffee shop on the floor in one of the rooms where people could just come and start to get to know each other. So they're not actually frightened of having that emotional tax about, oh my God, am I saying the right thing? Am I behaving the way I should be? And is it the right thing? Oh my God, I said something. Do they take it wrong way around, or do they get, do they take it the wrong way? And did I actually hurt somebody? And as being an ethnic minority, you do feel that sometimes you don't quite belong in that organization. I think EDI, what it does is it creates that belonging, but it's got to be that space that's open to anyone to express themselves freely. I think that's very important as well.
Lovely, thank you. And Sadia, your thoughts on this?
Yes, so most of my clients will come to me because of this glass ceiling, and it's always an interesting conversation, my coaching clients. It's always an interesting conversation because you ask the organizations, what's your view about this glass ceiling and this particular individual? And they say they're brilliant. We want them to go to the top. That's why they're having coaching. We want them to do really well. It's just not happening. That's their conversation. Then I speak to the coachee, the person that I'm coaching, and it's like I said at the beginning, they know they look amazing on paper, but they just don't feel it. So you've got this organization telling them they're brilliant and asking them to do more and more and more and more, and they're doing more and more and more and overachieving and doing brilliantly, but they're not feeling it. And what they're doing is carrying the glass ceiling on their shoulders. They've been told there's a glass ceiling. Everybody talks about this glass ceiling, and every meeting they go into, every review they go into, they are carrying this glass ceiling on their shoulders. And it's really heavy, really heavy. And they're just working harder and harder. So what we often do with coaching, what coaching does is really challenge that glass ceiling. Are you aware of it? How is it really impacting on you? In what specific ways is it impacting on you? And we break it down. So we deal with whatever is impacting them when they walk into those meetings, rather than this illusionary glass ceiling that you can't really pinpoint, but you just know is really heavy. And we work with them on how to feel as good as they look on paper, for them to actually own all their strengths, own how brilliant they are, and for them to decide whether to smash through that glass ceiling, to walk around it. What works for them? It's not for everybody to smash through it. Some people need to work around it, but coaching often helps for that individual to understand there's nothing wrong with them. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not broken. They are good enough. They are worthy. They're absolutely where they should be in their career right now. They're doing brilliantly. But it's now just reached a point where they need to maneuver it in a slightly different way. Maybe they need a new sponsor, a new mentor. Maybe it's about looking out of themselves. It might be lots of different things, but it's understanding what they actually need and where they want to go and how they want to go there in their careers. And coaching helps with that conversation to give them the skills they need to do whatever they need to do, and the support, that objective support to do whatever they want to do in their careers, and take away the sting and the heaviness of this illusionary glass ceiling that they carry around with them.
Thank you so much, Sadia. And Joseph?
Yeah, brilliantly said, Sadia. One of the conversations I have with people is about confidence, that often we look at someone who looks confident and we compare that person to how we feel inside. But actually it's how what you're doing, what you're achieving, that you should be comparing to how they look or what they're achieving. And so many times, like Sadia was saying, there is a glass ceiling or there are challenges, but it is ourselves that we need to work on. And coaching exposes that, to say, actually, this part of it is the organization. There are systems that need to change. The culture needs to change. And perhaps consider how that conversation can be brought up to begin to change the culture, begin to shift systems that would allow you to blossom. But at the same time, it's also looking at you. What are the things in your circle of control or circle of influence? What are the things you can do? And being clear about them, being clear about what are the limiting beliefs you have, that no, nobody does that. Actually, who says nobody does that? Perhaps that is your strength. And if you can then own that strength and do that thing, maybe the first time somebody who looks like you has done it and achieved results. I know a lawyer who wanted to bring business into the company from the African continent, and nobody had done that. When he went ahead and did it, it brought so much business into the organization that he went straight up to partner level. And that is an example of doing something nobody should be doing, but actually that's a strength I have. I have a background in that area, therefore I can do it. So I think coaching can help you separate out what is yours and what is somebody else's, and see them differently, rather than it's not done, I'm not going anywhere.
Fantastic examples. Yes, Sadia. You're still muted. It didn't come off for some reason.
Oh, sorry. I completely agree with Joseph. I think Joseph made the great point, and I know some people in the chat have brought up the point as well on which I missed, was on the victim blaming. So that if we just focus on the individual and not the organization, then it could be that we're just focusing as it's victim blaming. And it's a great point. And I just wanted to come back on that. And Joseph picked up on it. There are things that the organization always needs to do. Just because you're working with an individual in coaching, we do not take away the fact that organizations need to do the work and that they're the ones that impose the glass ceiling. I completely agree with that. And there's nothing that, and there's that piece, and I'm not taking anything away from that piece. But what I've seen is, if we just focus on that piece, then I'm not helping the individual, because there are things, they still have to go to work each day and have the career that they really want to have and know how brilliant they are in their jobs. And having been there and had that glass ceiling imposed on me, I was much happier and did a much better job in my career when I just looked at myself as well and didn't wait for the organization. Because sometimes it's not the right organization, sometimes it is. But when I was clear on what I wanted and how I wanted to get there, I could have the conversations that I needed to have and feel empowered in my career, which really helped me. But it's a really good point that came up in the chat, and I know Joseph actually addressed it a lot better, but I just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you. Everyone's addressing the points beautifully. Yeah, and I think that sort of summarizing in some way, that I think that the coaching provides strategies to navigate the organization and strategies for success for the underrepresented person. And it can also give them, particularly if the person who's coaching them has some lived experience of what it feels like to be underrepresented, also a level of empathy and the opportunity not to have to explain themselves or feel that their experience will be dismissed. And I don't think that can be underestimated. So if the coach, you have to explain what it feels like to be a person from an underrepresented group, and maybe that's questioned, that can really undermine that learning process. But if there's this understanding that I empathize, not collude with your lived experience, but I empathize with it, that can move that relationship and that learning forward much more quickly. So that piece is really key.
I think wanted to add, which Sadia added as well, and Joseph, sometimes I think it's important for the organization to do a regular checkup and also like a regular survey as well. Don't take things for granted. If everything is going well on the surface, things are not going that well in that sense, because we are very good at masking how we behave. And I think that was brought up. But also, I think, create a space as line managers and leaders to have that conversation with individuals, especially if you can from ethnic minority, because we are very good at putting our face on saying how wonderful we feel. And sometimes I think if people know you well, empathy is so important. When people know you well, they can see when you're not yourself. Even on Zoom, you can do that just by looking around. As line managers, don't talk all the time and listen and look around. And if people normally on camera and they're not on camera suddenly, and then you know there's something going on. So be aware of that as well. So don't just take things for granted, what's on the surface as well.
Lovely, lovely point. So we're moving on to our final question. And if you do have questions for Suki, Joseph, Sadia, please put them in the chat, because we'll need to get them in pretty quickly. But my final question from me is, what about majority group leaders? And in the UK, the majority group at senior level are white men. What's unique about coaching that could support them with their EDI journey? And I'll start with you, Sadia.
Yeah, I think it's two things. Coaching helps them to have conversations they wouldn't have with anybody else. So when they've made mistakes in particular, because often when people make mistakes, and especially the senior leaders and white male senior leaders, they're not necessarily used to making lots of mistakes. They usually know exactly what their business does and how to talk with people, and they've been really successful. So making mistakes and offending people and having negative comments from the company about things is something that they're really fearful of. And coaching helps that, support them to be brave, support them to understand they will actually make mistakes on the EDI journey, because we all do. We've seen today, we all say things, and it's good. It's that's what happens on the EDI journey. We're all learning. We haven't got it right, so we're all making mistakes. So it helps to give them the confidence. It helps them to actually take action. And as Joseph and Suki have mentioned in the past, it helps to challenge them on why they're really doing it. Are they connected with it? Is this just a business tick box situation? Or do they really care about having an inclusive organization? And are they really connected to it? They really want it, and they want to turn up as an inclusive leader, a curious leader, an empathetic leader, all the things we need them to be in order for there to be an inclusive organization. Do they really want it? And in coaching, you can challenge, you can ask those questions that I don't think their peers necessarily around a board table are going to ask them. So we can ask them questions that other people don't ask. And that's why they come to us, because they want to be asked those questions, and they want to have to think about the answers and feel uncomfortable. They're not going to want to feel uncomfortable around a board table and talk about those things. But in a coaching, confidential, 100% confidential situation, with people that have been through it, that understand it, that have many other clients where they have the same conversations, they have the experience, they know what questions to ask, they know how to create a safe space and not be judgmental. It's not about shaming anyone. It's not about judging anyone. It's about opening all the opportunities available for them to see and connect to an inclusive organization.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was so passionately delivered. And Joseph, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. Well done, Sadia. One of the things that comes across often when I have conversations is I realize that we have different lenses that we look at the world in. If you've grown up in a particular environment, you've gone to particular schools, you've had a particular career direction, you've mixed with people who look like you. There's a lens you look at the world, which is not the only lens from which others look at the world. And having a coach like us who can look at the world, sees the world as you see it, but can also examine it in another way, can reframe what's happened for you or help you reframe it, you can begin to then see that, no, there is another way of looking at this that I'm not looking at it from. So you're having a conversation about race. For many people who are of the majority group in the UK, how important is that race ethnicity? Because you take it for granted. But for other people who are not in that group, it is about their ethnicity, it is about their identity. So they might want to have that conversation, but you don't think it's relevant. If you understand how important it might be for them to then be able to bring themselves fully into work, if they feel they can express that, perhaps you might give it a little bit more time, give it a little bit more attention. So that examining that lens, coaching can help you do that. The other thing is, I love helping leaders with the question, who are you? Because who are you, what your values are, can help you understand where are you coming at this conversation from. If kindness, for example, is one of your values, in that difficult conversation, are you being kind? Do you want to be kind? Because if you do want to be kind, what needs to be different when you enter that conversation? So coaching with people like us gives you that opportunity to examine the lens, then decide what you are going to do with it. I know a leader who changed the culture in his organization because he began to bring himself fully into work rather than just the corporate face that comes. Because he began to show himself, other people relaxed, and then creativity blossomed because people now felt they belonged there. Thank you, Jenny.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great advocate for that. I think people talk a lot about bringing themselves, full selves to work, being authentic. Not so many people actually do it. And it's great to hear that it can really work for people. Suki, your thoughts on this?
Well, Kurti made a comment in the comments in the chat. EDI looks good on papers, but when it comes to stats, it does not reflect. Recently, I have had a conversation with a leader, very similar conversation. He said, oh my God, we have all these things going on in the organization. And then when I actually did the survey and looked at the stats, it doesn't quite reflect what I am trying to achieve. And I think that tells me then, are we creating the right space for people to have conversations? The psychological safety, are we allowing people to be free, having free conversations, open conversations? It's like what you said about authentic conversations. And I think that is very important. Sometimes when we are leaders, we just say, right, this is what we're going to do. Like, for example, in higher education, we have something called an award called Athena Swan. It measures where you are in your journey on EDI across from bronze to gold. And some people just tick box and say, yeah, we've done it. And then they park it. They don't actually create that environment and the culture that's needed to evolve. And I think coaching, what it does is underpins what we are trying to achieve as leaders into that organization. And also coaching those leaders is very important, because it's not about tick box exercise and parking it. It needs to be carried through. And they need to understand that not everyone, like Joseph and Sadia said, looks like us, behave like us. There are differences. Even if they look like us, they behave differently. I think is understanding that conversation piece. I think creating that brave space is very important as leaders. And if people challenge you and say openly, please don't be frightened to be honest about it. Say, I am trying to change it. Ask the question back to that individual who challenged you. Say, what can I do differently? What do you think I could behave? How can I behave differently to create that space that's important to you to be the best person that you can be where you are? So I think that's going to be important, because I think coaching, like we said earlier on, is not a quick fix. It's not a magic bullet that's going to happen. What we need to understand, it's long term, and be patient, but also be understanding of each other as well. That's very important as well, as leaders and as people who are trying to create an environment and organization.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful points there. So we have a question from Lydia, which is, do you think that flatter ranks in organizations would help in general, and people in people progressing on a fair basis? So instead of having this steep hierarchy of, of many rungs on the ladder, having it much flatter, do you think it's going to create in general a way for people to progress in a fairer way? Welcome your thoughts on that. Anyone want to say anything about that?
Well, it doesn't quite work. I think it's important to be clear about the message that you're trying to get out there. I think it doesn't matter how your organization is. It's about, I think, being open, having those authentic conversations, but I think it's about embracing each other. It's important, rather than think, oh my God, she said that. It's really weird. It must be a Sri Lankan thing, or that's what my background is. Oh my gosh, she said that. Is that a Welsh thing? We should stop saying that. And I think we should actually treat individuals as individuals. So I don't think, going back to your question, Lydia, I think it's about important. It's not about flat structure, but it's about allowing that freedom of movement between people and understanding between people. I think it's important, but having that clear message as well, where we're going. I mean, it's like Sadia talked about glass ceilings, and it's quite sad if there are ceilings out there, because you are losing out as leaders by not recognizing everyone for their individuality and what they can contribute. So I don't think structure matters at all. It's the message that comes from, I think, matter.
I do think, because if we realize that organizations are there not for us, they've been set up, they have a purpose, they're to do what they need to do. If it's a profit-making organization, they've got shareholders, they've got to make profit. So does a flatter structure serve the business? If it does serve the business, then yes, and if it does also address the EDI question, then yes, go ahead and do it. But it is unlikely that the leaders in an organization will be, in order to promote EDI, change a structure just for that reason. So I think it's got to fit that. What kind of, if you have a flatter structure, what does it look like? What will it do? How will it enable more conversations, better conversations? People belonging, people bring themselves in fully. Will it work? So it's got to be examined. So I'm sorry, that's not a very straightforward answer, but it's the reality of how organizations work.
Lovely. Yeah, unfortunately, this is complex, isn't it? That's why we're talking about it, because it's such a complex area, and there isn't just a one-size-fits-all solution. Your lens analogy has been taken further, Joseph. So someone says here, it's like going for an eye test at the optician. You see through old glasses or tired lenses to see what you think you can see, or what you believe you know is there. But if you are challenged to read the smaller print, then you face a fear of not knowing a wider picture. So only when fresh lenses are put in front of your eyes can you see a bigger, fresher picture. an opportunity to learn there is more not being seen fully. It takes a while to get to grips with the new lenses, but soon you can learn to adapt. And this doesn't mean that you need to stop there. You can keep looking further. So I think that's a really excellent analogy that we can all grab onto, isn't it, from Joanne. And Liam talks about time, which I think is really important to discuss, because people either don't have the time for this work or are concerned that it's taking too long. And Liam says, I think one of the challenges is time. How long is too long for an organization to adapt and change with regard to EDI? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's important to have regular pulse checks to see whether you are going in the right direction, because that's one of the things that we all make a mistake of. And I'm speaking to leaders. That's one of the things that we don't do, because it's like any organization, like if you're, forget about EDI, if you're looking as a business, you look at profit margins, you look at all that, and you always have regular checks and regular pulse checks. But when it comes to EDI, we don't do enough of that. Are we going in the right direction? For some reason, EDI, I think it's like somebody said, it's a tick box exercise. It's just put aside, oh, it's going to happen. We could all the framework. Yes, it's going to happen. No problem. Yes. But it doesn't happen like that. You could have conversations, and you've got to have conversations, and you've got to keep going and measuring. And also, even if you have conversations, measure that. As leaders, it's important to measure the return on investment, what you are doing, and you can see that. And if you've got a picture of, say, for example, like the framework that I was talking about, Athena Swan, is every year we submit a form for bronze, silver, and gold. Bronze is like a pulse check where you are now. Silver is how far have you advanced on that journey. And gold is like you're a great organization where you are actually valuing EDI, all the things that you said you're going to put into place. And it's like it gives you a check then. So it's important, I think, if you can, get some kind of award or something that gets you going and motivate staff to actually measure it. I think if you say it's going for a year and nothing's happened, I think that's too long and too bad. I don't think your investment is working. 6 months is a good pulse check to see if it's working or not. So be aware of, treat it as a business impact, treat it as a business goal. It's like what Joseph said, it is a business goal. It adds value to your organization. It's not just something to talk about and park it. It's not that. Coaching will underpins all that, but then again, measure it all the time on a regular basis.
We've got one last question that I want to make sure we get to. We've only got a couple of minutes. So is there a place for coaching or even reverse coaching for leaders of organizations to really understand what life in their organization, community, etc. is like for the people who live with less privilege than they do? What are your thoughts on that? Who wants to speak to that? Sadia? Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And when we're saying reverse coaching, is that like reverse mentoring?
I think yes, we'll see.
And I've seen really great reverse mentoring programs work really well, because I think senior leaders listen more to people in their organizations. You can have somebody external come in, but if you've got a high flying junior telling them, you know, their experience in a really safe environment, it works better. Again, it's one-to-one. You've created that, it's confidential. You've created that private, safe place for great conversations to happen. And as Suki keeps saying, we need to create more safe spaces in organizations for those to happen. And also when a junior person says something to a senior and says, we need this to happen, and that senior person doesn't do it, that's a much huger impact, because you've got somebody that they walk past every day in the office and look and see, actually, I haven't done what I said I'm going to do. And that person's now actually gone. And that was my fault, actually, because they told me exactly what I needed to do. They told me their experience, and I just didn't do it. You can't hide from reverse mentoring. My one thing about reverse mentoring is you can't just have, it needs to be part of a program where you have check-ins, where you support both sides of that reverse mentoring relationship. Both sides need supporting throughout the reverse mentoring journey. I've seen lots fail just because you say, here's your mentor, here's the mentee, off you go, have the conversation, and nothing more happens. Those don't tend to do as well. But where you have regular check-ins, just as Suki said, where people can celebrate the conversations they've had, the successes they've had, which you can't always point to, but when you ask the right questions, you realize what you can celebrate and the wins that you have. I think it works brilliantly, and I recommend it.
Thank you so much.
Jenny, it's what Sadia was saying about the preparation, the support, and that starts before the mentoring starts or the coaching starts. If we are talking of reverse coaching, remember coaching is a skilled piece of work. So the person who's coaching needs to be trained, because it's not you about telling them, it's about creating that space for them. Now, some of the reverse mentoring schemes have failed because the senior person is not expecting what they get and is not prepared to expect that they're going to get a lot of complaints about the suffering of the victim, how they felt as victims, and they begin to feel under pressure, and that this person doesn't come with any solutions. But if you prepare both sides to have this conversation with courage, but also with compassion, on seeing the other person, this is difficult for the senior person. Therefore, yes, you tell them what is really going on. However, be aware of the impact it's having on them and give them space to respond. So there is support and preparation required for it to work well. That is when it works the best.
Thank you so much, Joseph. We're going to have to bring it to a close. I had one last question for the coaches, and I wonder if you could just type your response into the chat, everyone. So Joseph, Suki and Sadia, if you just type in, what's the big coaching question that anyone who wants to use coaching to advance EDI in their organization should ask themselves? And if you put that in the chat, that would be great to leave everyone with. And I want to say thank you. ROI is return on investment. So anyone who, I thought you were asking the question. You're asking, that's your question, is it?
That was
so
my question.
Question is, what's the return on investment? Okay, so I want to say thank you to everyone for attending today. A huge thanks to Sadia, Joseph and Suki, who you can find more about on the Diverse Coaching Directory, a directory which connects corporate organizations with coaches from Black, Asian and minority backgrounds. I want to say a big thank you to Snetta, who's been managing the chat, and she's also put a link to the directory in the chat as well. Our next event is called What Do We Mean by Intersectionality and Why Does It Matter? And that's taking place on the 24th of March. Again, Snetta's putting that in the chat. So we really look forward to welcoming you to that very interesting event. It's something that people don't think enough about in the UK, and something that I think you'll find really enlightening and really helpful. Sadia's question, what actions are coming out of the EDI program, and how are you implementing accountability for those actions? And let's find Joseph's question. It's got lost in here somewhere. Hopefully someone can see Joseph's question in here as well. It's moved so fast. If everything were possible, what one thing would you do to change, I think, to get the change you personally want in EDI? So 3 great questions there for you. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye.